Wakamo in her Hovercraft is a yellow armoured total assault boss who closely resembles her original Allied Operation version. She's not an exact copy, because if they made an exact copy, it would be pretty boring and unsuitable for the game mode. For Total Assault, they've added some mechanics which make crowd control and attack speed relevant to defeating the boss. I will cover these new mechanics and also remind you of all her old ones. If you prefer reading text, I have document guides written by myself linked in the description of this video. Otherwise, welcome to SCHALE Raid Tactics. I'm Kozzy and thank you for coming. In Phase 1, you will fight Wakamo in her swimsuit among some ruins. Here, she will very frequently pull a weapon out of her pocket. She has a rifle, which will stun the nearest unit, an RPG, which will explode on the first unit it hits, and a shotgun, which will penetrate and hit everything in a line. Whoever gets hit by these weapons will get 2 flower petals above their heads. If a unit has 5 petals, they will instantly die. These petals put constant kill pressure on your team. You could try to divert attention away from your team using decoys like Pillow Summer, or you could try to juggle aggro between your units and have them balance out the petals. But sooner or later, Wakamo will stack enough petals to be a threat. You have to remove these petals, and the only way to do so is to fill the CC gauge using crowd control. That's all you need to do. When the petals get close to being complete, apply CC to Wakamo to reset. Of course, there is a small twist to make this at least a little more engaging. The CC gauge can only be filled 3 times, and after the 3rd time, the gauge will disappear, and you will no longer have any way to remove the petals. Once you've used the last CC gauge, you will eventually get wiped. Even if the flower doesn't wipe you, Wakamo herself will, because filling the CC gauge also makes the boss stronger. By the 3rd stage, Wakamo will be dealing 75% more damage compared to the beginning of the fight. This makes Wakamo a kill threat in multiple ways. You can't tank her damage directly, and even if you could, you'll get wiped by the flower petals. Luckily, we're not done yet with the CC gauge. If it was only Wakamo getting stronger, this would be an incredibly unbalanced raid. Your students also get stronger. By the 3rd stage of CC, your team will be dealing 4 times their usual damage. This is a very powerful buff, and if you play it correctly, you should be able to defeat Wakamo before she defeats you. To do this properly, pacing is really important. In your first attempt at the boss, I recommend following the pace of the petals. If only one student is getting petals, filling the CC gauge just before the 5th stack will put you perfectly on pace to use the entire 4-minute timer. After some practice, you might become comfortable with applying your CC faster. Of course, this puts you at risk of Wakamo wiping you, but if you have the damage to make it work, then it is a risk worth taking. The best thing you can do is go into mock and find out the best pacing for your team. Start with CCing her at petals pace, and then ramp it up if you feel like you need more damage. The interaction between the petals and the CC is really the only thing you need to pay attention to in Phase 1. The rest of the details are very minor, like this running sequence in the middle of the fight. It is purely cosmetic. These mortars don't do any damage, so they only serve to waste your time. Something to be careful of is your cost. You don't want it to be sitting at max during this sequence because it's all going to waste. Wakamo will always try to run when there's 2 minutes left on the clock, so it would be a good idea to use your cost before this moment. Another honorable mention is that on Insane and Above, Wakamo's rifle will ricochet to another student. This is really painful, so you're probably going to need 2 tanks or a way to redirect the ricochet. Besides that, once you've got the pacing down, you should very well be on your way to Phase 2. The scene will change as you enter Phase 2. This phase is the simpler of the 2 phases. You don't need CC anymore. Instead, what you will need are units that have a large number of hits. For every 15 hits you land, a 10% damage taken debuff will apply for 10 seconds. This debuff can stack 30 times, and each stack has an individual timer. So let's say you land 15 attacks in 10 seconds. Then, 9 seconds later, you land the next 15 attacks. You will have a total of 2 stacks, but the first stack will only last 1 more second before it drops off. Once it drops, you will have 1 stack for the next 9 seconds. This debuff is pretty strong. And if you want to maximize your damage, you should bring students with multi-hits in their kit. Some students have fast multi-hitting auto attacks that can passively provide a lot of stacks. Other students have X skills that can rack up a lot of stacks very quickly. You really want to utilize this mechanic, not just because it improves your performance, but because there's literally nothing else to do in this raid. After the Hovercraft throws some AoE at you, it will retreat and then summon a radio tower. This radio tower does nothing. Well, any damage you do to it will be reflected to the boss, but in terms of any meaningful interaction, none. It just sits there and spins. All you can do is attack it until it goes away. While you're doing that, missiles will constantly spawn in and try to get past your team. Don't worry, your students can't get hit. What the missiles can hit is the resort sitting off screen. If enough missiles get past your students and hit the resort, you will game over. So naturally, you would think that you will need to shoot the missiles down. But no, you don't, because there's a pair of fully automatic turrets that shoot the missiles down for you. These turrets are so effective that it is literally impossible for the resort to blow up. They will shoot down every single missile without fail. So in conclusion, there is a fireworks show while you are attacking the tower that does nothing. Overall, Phase 2 is a big metal scarecrow. Even when the hoverboat is around, it's hardly a threat to you. You just need to shoot the stupid thing until it dies. That's it for Wakamo's mechanics. If Blue Archive was to ever have a dummy practice mode, then the hoverboat would be the dummy. The hardest part about this boss is not fighting her in-game, but rather your ability to put together a decent team. So next up is the team building. As Blue Archive gets older, the best and most recommended students to bring to a fight may change, but what will not change are the fundamental principles for building the team. In this section, I would advise paying attention to the roles you have to fill out on the team rather than the students themselves. With that said, in Phase 1 of Wakamo, I would recommend to have on each team at the minimum 1 DPS, 1 tank, and at least 1 CC. DPS is pretty straightforward, just bring the strongest single target damage dealers you have. They don't need to do anything else. Having just 1 tank is good enough on Extreme and below. If you're doing this boss on Insane, then you should consider using 2. Tanks with some form of self-care are ideal. Wakamo deals mostly single target damage, so if your tank can heal themselves, it saves you the need to bring a dedicated healer. That save slot can then go towards another unit who can help your DPS. Finally, you're going to need at least 1 CC. Take note that some units can automatically use CC, while other units may need you to manually use their X skills. Auto CCs don't require any cost, but they are inflexible and can make managing Wakamo's buff difficult. Some units have both. There is no right or wrong CC unit. You need to pick an approach that will suit your team. The rest of the team can be filled with whatever healer, support, or extra DPS you see fit. Phase 1 is the harder of the 2 phases. You want to use your best units and, ideally, try to clear Phase 1 in 1 team. This way, you can have the rest of your roster sleep on the beach in Phase 2. Once you get into Phase 2, you can kinda just throw whatever you want at the boss. If you want to be a bit more optimal, then at the minimum, try to nominate on your team at least 1 main DPS. And ideally, you'll back her up with at least 1 or 2 multi-hitting students. Finally, on Insane and above, you must have a healer. Again, the DPS is pretty straightforward. If you can, try to pick a DPS that has multi-hits in their kit. That will generally deal more damage than typical burst damage dealers because they help contribute to the hit count. But if burst damage is all you have, then it's not the end of the world. Gotta do with what you got. You won't need a tank because the boss doesn't deal targeted damage. If the boat's AoE is a problem for you, you can bring a healer to top yourself up. This is optional on Extreme and below, but you will need one for Insane. On Insane, the turrets need fuel, which you can provide by healing them. Otherwise, if you don't have any survival problems, then you don't need any healing either. The rest of the team should be filled with whoever deals the most amount of hits. If these multi-hit units deal yellow damage, then that's really good, you should use it. But even if they didn't deal yellow damage, bringing them purely to stack up the hit counts is still something you want to do. Increasing the hit stacks will contribute more damage than the usual attack or crit damage supports. You can fall back on supports if you're running out of multi-hits. but adding more units to increase your hit count should be your first priority. That's really it for the team building. Like I said earlier, phase 1 is the phase where you should commit your best units. Once you get past phase 1, you can kinda just sleep through the rest of the raid. This concludes the Wakamo raid guide. The concepts for this boss should be easy to understand, but I somehow struggled to find a way to present them. Even the Greg guide was easier to write. I think part of it was definitely just me falling asleep at the keyboard because this boss just doesn't have that engaging and awesome factor to it all the other bosses have. For the record, I don't dislike this boss. Sometimes you need a break. After the complete chaos that is Goz and Greg, who instigate negative feelings from people, perhaps it's not a bad thing that Nexon completely overreacted and gave us a boss on the other side of the spectrum. If there's one thing I know about gacha gamers, is that they prefer a brainless experience over a frustrating one. If I may be presumptuous, I think Nexon's brains also weren't turned on while they were making this boss. Yeah, it's a port from the Allied Operation version, but surely they could have at least changed the music. The very least they could have done is swap out this Sleepy Resort music with Burning Love, right? Well, whatever. It's not really that important, and I kinda do understand what they were going for, even if it fell a little short. I hope you find a way to enjoy the boss regardless. Good luck and have fun.